What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, Football Beyond the Stats, and our Mover of the Year analysis for 2021 with Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, as we come to a conclusion of our Mover of the Year deep dive, I wanted to offer a bit of a perspective, that which what I would do and that which what I would bring to the table if Jonathan Taylor and I partnered together and he were to become part of our learning environment. Where would my specific initiatives be with him from the needs analysis that I would have gained from our film and video analysis over the course of the National Football League season in 2021 and even prior to that point? Meaning, where would my emphasis be and how would we attempt to chase those qualities, chase those gaps, and attempt to fill them in an attempt to make the most dexterous mover currently in the National Football League even more skillful, to behave in more functional fashions. Now, of course, if you have followed along at Football Beyond the Stats in 2021, you will know that my mantra, my overall guiding objective for this year within our learning environments was oriented around becoming one with the problem. In order to become one with the problem, obviously one has to be very attuned and very adaptable. They have to be very connected and coupled to the peculiar individual problem which lies in front of them. Those movement problems, obviously, for an NFL running back are very complex, dynamic, and emergent. So, in order to do that, that attunement and adaptability really needs to take center stage. But again, if a performer is already the most attuned and adaptable, are there things that we can do? And of course, the answer is obviously yes. And it's today that I want to kind of dive into what I would focus our attention and intentions around. What would be my guiding intentions as I brought that to the table and tried to work alongside of Jonathan Taylor. Now, before we go any further, I need to offer this precedence, and this is really just in case you haven't viewed any of the other videos that were above in this Mover of the Year analysis. But let's remember that dexterity is my guiding objective with everything I do. It's really where the paradigm is starts and ends, right? This paradigm, meaning how I think, what I believe, and how I attempt to behave in the learning environment. What we're doing is trying to chase the expression of dexterity. Dexterity, per Nikolai Bernstein, as the ability to find or coordinate or control a movement solution for any emerging movement problem. And of course, in any situation, in any condition, we highlighted how Jonathan Taylor is the epitome of that expression, the epitome of that characteristic of dexterity throughout the course of the 2021 National Football League season. But of course, Bernstein didn't stop there, where he actually took this another step further and talked about how dexterity is not within the movements or actions themselves, but is revealed in how these movements behave in their interaction with the environment, an environment that has unexpectedness and surprises. And of course, Jonathan Taylor, as we can see based on the pictures outlined on this presentation, but more specifically when we go back through those deep dives of the movement analysis that I tried to lock arms with you with right up above on this blog post, Jonathan Taylor really again is about becoming one with the problem, but we can never become too tightly coupled with our interaction or in our interaction with an environment and with those surprises and with that unexpectedness and with that chaos and complexity and dynamic nature that obviously American football brings for us. But with that in mind, there are a number of opportunities that present initiatives or intentions that I would attempt to chase if he were coming to me. And of course, I started this presentation with some ideas from Nikolai Bernstein, one of my heroes within this movement skill space. Another one just so happens to be obviously the late and great Bruce Lee. And of course, this idea is one that again sets a precedence within all of my athlete and interactions to honestly and authentically express oneself. As Bruce Lee said, man or the individual, the living creature, is always more important than any established style or system. And I think if I were really being critical of Jonathan Taylor, who he is and how he behaves, that there is still some room for growth here. There is still an opportunity to chase this as an initiative, to find himself when he is in the midst of a dynamic and complex and emergent movement problem, to really find ways to authentically and honestly express himself within his movement and through his movement and in that interaction with the opportunities of the environment. There are some times that I feel as though Jonathan Taylor might get a little too constrained, a little bit too much, too rigid, maybe attached a little too closely to movement solutions, movement strategies that may have worked in times before, that isn't necessarily the most functional movement solution or strategy for that respective problem. And so to honestly and authentically express oneself essentially means for me within the movement to not move like anyone else, to really only move like yourself and to adopt your own style. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can't study the movement qualities or skills of others and the strategies that they utilize or how they may go about solving problems or taking advice or recommendations from our coaches. But what it really means is when all is said and done, when you face that problem, to become one with it, the best expression of that oneness is going to come from oneself. And I would look to chase that and attempt to put Jonathan Taylor in a position where he could chase that, to explore and search and discover who he really is within the solving of those respective problems. So, what does that really mean? What does that really look like? And what does that really come from? For me, it's about a refinement of adding more tools in the toolbox. And of course, throughout the deep dive with Jonathan Taylor in the videos from 2021, I continually highlighted as to the true abundance within his toolbox already, the true abundance within his skill set that really allowed for the adaptability. As I always say, abundance precedes adaptability, or degeneracy, if we want to use a really technical movement skill term, precedes dexterity. So before we can find a movement solution for any emerging movement problem, we likely have to possess a wide open movement toolbox. Jonathan Taylor has an open movement toolbox. However, there are some specific examples of some tools that I would like to see him refine even further. Those are tools or strategies or solutions, if you will, ways of acting or ways of interacting that I would like to see him chase deliberately and intentionally. And again, I don't mean in isolation or in decontextualized fashion. I mean looking to apply them in an alive movement problem or in the midst of an alive movement problem with opponents and with scenarios and situations that are alive and have unpredictability and require the emergence of a functionally fit movement solution. Now, I highlighted some of these specific examples throughout the course of the videos, one being him getting a little high with his center of gravity and his center of mass, a little high pad level at times, that I feel as though that is really starting to often show itself with the movement positions or patterns that he executes into and out of his cutting actions. Specifically, I would like to see him chase a lower pad level during deceleration specifically, but that, and we can sometimes see him, as I've highlighted, or even as the picture in the upper right shows, where he goes from high to low in a jump stop, hop stop fashion to decelerate in many cases. And as I've highlighted throughout the videos at times, he uses that very functionally. So I don't want to take that away per se. But what I would like him to add to it would be coming in lower and sometimes wider, to where he were able to give himself, once he plants and prepares to cut, he's in a sway type of position where, again, as those steps come into deceleration, he isn't coming 1, 2, and then hopping as he has a tendency to do, which then typically relates to a jump cut reacceleration. But what I would like to see him do is maybe take two or three additional steps to decelerate, which some sounds somewhat counterintuitive at times, knowing that we have usually limited time or space to be able to decelerate, plant, and cut or evade, right? But I think that it would really allow him an opportunity to have more options for reacceleration, not only within the respective strategy, but also within the path. So he would have an abundance of potential fits to the movement solution. So coming in and actually getting wider with each one of those passing steps. So when he gets to the final steps of the plant or of in the preparation for the cut, now he's in a width, so he's coming here more and able to sway and or slice left or right out of a more outside foot plant type of position where there would be more aggressiveness, there would be more violence in and out of that cut to actually have more efficiency. But it really isn't about the efficiency per se. Now, that can certainly be an added benefit, but it's about being able to have more potential fits of a respective solution or strategy that one could use. Okay. He already has tremendous abundance. I'm not trying to take away anything from that. He also has this really attuned, highly connected use of this jump cut. And that jump cut is one that is still, like I've mentioned numerous times, very functional. It's very flexibly adjustable and it's very adaptable then. But I would like to see more strategies. Okay. Power cuts, outside foot power cuts, speed cuts, and as we're about to get into, some more novel, creative movement strategies and solutions as well. And with that novelty, with that newness, that creativity, again, as Bruce Lee said, his mantra, Bruce Lee's mantra of Jeet Kune Do, his own personal interpretation of the martial arts was to use no way as the way and no limitation as the limitation. Right. And again, I put some pictures here of Jonathan Taylor back from the University of Wisconsin. He, at those times when the problems were moving slower around him or were less complex, there were less interacting component parts, such as less opponents and or teammates in tighter spaces or in confined spaces, that he often found himself utilizing more novelty or more creativity within his movement strategies or solutions. Hurdles, jukes, feints, fakes. Whereas we've seen less and less and less of that in the National Football League. Some of that, of course, is due to necessity. The people that he's playing against and the opponents that are there are obviously at a higher level of both skill as well as physical prowess. So that constrains or channels and takes away certain movement strategies, specifically more novel or creative ones. But I do think that there's a tremendous opportunity ahead of Jonathan Taylor here, that he's kind of in this place where things are slowing down for him now after 2 years in the National Football League. And he has more coordination, he has more control, he has more ownership than he once did. And I think it's there that as that ownership continues to go up and the speed starts to slow down and the complexity, the deep waters of those complexity, he starts to learn new strategies for sort of swimming in that complexity. I think he would be well served to find some of those novel or creative movement strategies or solutions again. I put new in quotations there for a reason, because of course, every movement strategy, every movement solution is always new. There are no two movement problems that are ever truly the same at a certain level, just like no two movement problems are ever the same. So problems and solutions, obviously they are dynamically, mutually, reciprocally connected. So I'm not suggesting he just start making moves for moves' sake per se, but finding new ways to solve movement problems in alive movement problems, I think is a way to actually take his dexterity, his problem solving capabilities to the next level of its development. And part of that is something that he's already started to employ on his own. Again, another Bruce Lee quote, and you probably are going to hear a little bit of a broken record there, as Bruce Lee kind of talked about the deliberate and intentional use of deceptive strategies, surprising one's opponent and catching their moment of helplessness. We already saw that a little bit from Jonathan Taylor here, especially in probably the tail end, maybe the last half of the 2021 National Football League season. I highlighted it a couple of times, including in week 18 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This deliberate, intentional, purposeful, deceptive nature because of his speed qualities and capabilities. And as I highlighted numerous times throughout the course of the season, Jonathan Taylor has a world class for football linear speed capabilities, right? And again, I always kind of give that caveat, world class for football. And on a football field, when we're talking about the application and the functionality of speed strategies, because of that speed and because of that quick acceleration, where it actually puts him at an advantage to be able to deceive guys intentionally and really try to change tempos and paces and navigation paths or angles, potentially combinations of movement strategies, such as that Walter Payton like high step, or where he's trying to actually like change his body lean or his body height, his center of gravity height, while he's in the midst of running on a linear path. That deliberate and intentional deception can create additional opportunities for him to act in other ways, right? Just like we saw again in week 18 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It wasn't the only case or instance where that was the case throughout the course of the NFL season. It just so happened to be the only time we really truly illustrated it explicitly within our deep dive. But really in the tail end, and again, the second half of the National Football League season, because he was starting to find those additional opportunities, he was still having the control in the ownership of his speed, his angle, his path, as well as his strategies and what could be combined to it. There is a true opportunity here. While he still possesses this higher speed capabilities in comparison to his peers, specifically defenders, linebackers, or even defensive backs in the open field, where the running back or the ball carrier knows where they want to go, or they're really in control of this path, that he might be able to deliberately find more opportunities here if he were to be deliberately deceptive. Another opportunity here, a major opportunity, I believe, is perceptual attunement across the width of the landscape. Now, throughout our deep dive, I continually talked about Jonathan Taylor's high sensitivity to certain affordances, high sensitivity to certain specifying information sources that which specify those opportunities or affordances to act. But there are times where he gets a little tunnel vision, where that perceptual attunement, he's able to take in information that lies right here in front of him, and he has resolution there. He's able, specifically in shared affordances with teammates and how they're acting, again, as long as it's kind of here in his focal vision. But if it starts to get out in his periphery, whether it's right or left, and it's wider in that landscape, there are things that he misses, and specifically opportunities to act in given ways to bounce plays outside at times. I would like to see him be put in places or in problems where there's more going on in his periphery that he must attend to, and then find ways to educate his attention to be able to pick up those opportunities or those information sources, whether it's opponents who are moving in his periphery, or whether it's teammates who are moving there, or whether it's chunks or gaps in open space. Again, as JJ Gibson told us, the more skilled perception becomes wider, finer, longer, richer and fuller, right? So you were able to paint the more complete picture as you perceive and detect information in the world. There is a true opportunity here to take his skill to the next level, to become even more attuned, more sensitive across the width of that landscape. Some of that will come in the form of him having better scanning, more continual scanning. And we know that he has the opportunity to do exactly that, or I should say, he has the ability and capabilities of doing exactly that. We often see him when he gets into the open field, he is on a constant search for information. But when more bodies get around him, I do believe that he gets a little too tunnel vision at times. And this is why, if he were in my learning environment, we would direct a majority of our efforts here to getting him more sensitive to those opportunities, because there's more meat on the bone. There's more plays to be made. There's more opportunities out there across the width of that landscape. And sort of the last part of that is acting upon successive nested affordances. Okay. As I mentioned before, he is the hallmark of attunement and adaptability. And he does have high sensitivity and attunement to that which what is happening right immediately in front of him. But what I would like to see is within even that tunnel vision, him solving the initial problem in front of him, the immediate local movement problem, which usually takes place in the form of, say, a defender, such in this case on this picture here, interacting with Eric Reid, number 20 for the Houston Texans. But he would be solving this problem that is immediately in front of him, this local movement problem, based on the problem which lies right behind, deeper within the global movement problem or the disposition of that movement problem. Okay. And so I know this can be a slightly confusing topic, but for running backs, I believe that this actually represents or equates to the highest level of skill, the highest level of movement problem solving, the highest level of dexterity. Think of like a Barry Sanders or a Marshall Faulk. They often could be found solving this immediate movement problem based on what's happening from specifying information, that which what is unfolding deeper, longer within the dispositional movement problem, that which what would be happening behind that immediate defender or this immediate interaction that is taking place right in front of oneself. So how do you do that? You have movement problems that again are more alive, that change repetition to repetition in a repetition without repetition fashion, to where that player, that skilled performer must become sensitive to and attuned to how players are moving deeper within the problem. So they must solve a problem immediately in front of them while also simultaneously attending to the information that is unfolding behind that problem. So, where defenders are going, how teammates and defenders may be interacting, what space and gaps are opening up back there, how fast that player is moving along with the one that is immediately in front. And there's a really big room or opportunity for growth here for almost any skilled ball carrier, even for the game's most skillful, even for the game's most dexterous. So these last two opportunities, along with the other four that I mentioned prior to that point, really kind of create the opportunities for growth, the gaps that still exist, or how Jonathan Taylor should focus his emphasis heading forward into the off seasons coming ahead. So whether it's this year or whether it's down the road, more and more complexity is going to be present within these movement problems as defenders, as well as coaches in their tactical strategies and that they employ, will start to present to Jonathan Taylor more frequently now that he is at the level that he truly is as the best running back currently in the game. Finally, this movement intelligence of the complex movement problems. Okay. And what do I really mean by that is as I just got done talking about on opportunity 6, the movement problems are going to get more and more and more complex. There will be less and less space. Defenses and defenders are going to start zeroing in on Jonathan Taylor's tendencies. And as that happens, the space is going to get condensed. The movement solutions are going to have to become more creative and more adaptable and sometimes more novel. And I think it's there where he has to swim in the deep waters of complexity more frequently in the learning environments he places himself under. Okay. So whether that's specifically at the Indianapolis Colts and having people surround him and him having to get out of these scenarios and situations, solving these very complex movement problems. Again, those complex movement problems are really about numerous or more numerous interacting component parts and affordances that we necessarily weren't accustomed to because these problems are escalating in chaos and intensity and difficulty in solving. But if he can learn to exist there, to get more comfortable and coordinated and controlled within that chaos, I think he will stay one step ahead of the defenders and the defenses and the defensive coordinators and play callers across the league here to find a solution to any movement problem, even if it's ones that he hasn't seen before, or even if it's ones that he isn't supposed to be able to get out of. So those 7 opportunities are just directions or initiatives that I would take if Jonathan Taylor were in my learning environment. Okay. And hopefully it was able to spark some ideas and interests for each one of you out there who might act as a sport movement specialist working with American football players. If there are questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, whatever it may be, obviously, please feel free to leave me a comment here. If you like this deep dive into Jonathan Taylor, give me the thumbs up, obviously, hit me a like or a subscribe on our YouTube channel here. This is something that obviously I really highly enjoyed the process of, but I think we all need to continue to open up more narratives around the movement problem solving capabilities and qualities of even the National Football League's most skillful movers. For 2021 and our mover of the year and really putting the capstone on the 2021 National Football League season, I'm Sean Mishka. This is Football Beyond the Stats, and I'll talk to you guys again in the 2022, that is, National Football League season.